She was laughing at something he said when I noticed the way her index fingers circled the rim of her wine glass. Slow, rhythmic, like it was muscle memory. It was the same thing she used to do during our movie nights, right before she'd rest her head on my shoulder and fall asleep before the second act. I hadn't seen her do that in months. I stood there pretending to refill my drink from the absurdly large punch bowl, watching the two of them from behind a tower of plastic cups. Her hand on his chest, his hand still in the air mid-story, like he didn't want to break the moment by putting it back down. The music was some kind of synthy indie track, probably Claro or Men I Trust. Something soft enough that people could lie to each other without yelling. She wasn't supposed to be here with him. She was supposed to be here with me. But I had arrived 10 minutes late. That was my sin. 10 minutes. Enough time for a stranger to become a guest, for a conversation to become private, for the universe to realign itself around someone who smelled like fig and arrogance. I didn't even ask her why she hadn't waited. I just watched. When she finally turned and noticed me, across the room, still gripping my empty cup like it was going to protect me, she didn't flinch. No guilt, no nervous smile, not even a casual wave. Just a blink, like I was a speck of dust that briefly interrupted her view. So I smiled. I nodded, and I walked out the back door into the cold, without saying a word. No one noticed. Not even her. By the time the streetlights turned off at dawn, she was in tears. And I still don't know who she was crying for. I didn't sleep. Not a second. I lay on the couch fully clothed, staring at the ceiling like it owed me an answer. There was this tiny crack above the light fixture. A hairline fracture I must have seen 100 times before, but now it looked like it was growing, spreading slowly like a secret that didn't want to stay hidden anymore. Around 4:10 a.m., I heard the key in the door. She was quiet coming in, but not careful. That told me everything. Her boots hit the hallway floor too hard. Her coat landed on the chair in the kitchen instead of the hook. She didn't peek into the living room. Didn't check to see if I was asleep. It was almost choreographed, like she'd practiced the moment in her head on the ride home. I heard the fridge door open, then close. A pause, then the sink. She was pouring water, probably trying to wash the wine and guilt off her tongue. Maybe hoping I'd stayed at the party. Maybe hoping I wouldn't notice anything at all. She didn't come to bed. I didn't go to her. The next morning, I got up before she did. Not because I was pretending to be okay. I just couldn't sit in that room anymore, surrounded by our carefully curated lie. I walked into the kitchen and saw her coat still crumpled over the chair. 1,000 thoughts sprinted through my brain as I reached for it. Was I really going to do this? Was I really turning into that guy? The one who checks phones, pockets, laundry. The guy with suspicion under his fingernails. But I didn't stop myself. Her coat still smelled like smoke, not from cigarettes, but from that fire pit on Tobias's patio. I reached into the inside pocket, expecting nothing. But I felt something. Thin. Folded. A napkin? It was a receipt. From a bar. Not Tobias's house. Timestamped 12:41 a.m. A cocktail, and something handwritten on the back in messy cursive. Don't overthink it. You already know. I stood there holding it like it was an explosive device. And maybe it was. My stomach felt like it was turning inside out. The kind of twisting you only get when the truth is too big to fit in your chest. I put the receipt back exactly where I found it, even refolding it the way she had, like I was afraid it might notice. At 8:17, she walked into the kitchen. Her eyes were puffy but not bloodshot. That meant she hadn't cried last night. Just now, maybe. She avoided looking at me and went straight for the coffee maker. I watched her back the whole time, wondering if she could feel the heat of my stare, wondering if she wanted me to say something. But I didn't. Instead, I calmly asked, "Did you have fun last night?" She paused. Not long. Just half a second. Enough for the lie to load behind her eyes. Then she smiled, that tight, controlled smile that doesn't show teeth, and said, "Yeah, it was a good time." Then silence. She didn't ask me why I left early. She didn't ask why I hadn't texted. She didn't ask if something felt off. She just stood there sipping her coffee, as if our marriage wasn't hemorrhaging in the middle of a very quiet kitchen. But that receipt? That was the first drop of blood. That whole day I walked around like I had static in my ears. You know that hum you get when you're about to pass out? I had it for hours. I couldn't focus on anything. Emails blurred into alphabet soup. The dogs kept whining at the back door, but I forgot to let them out. I sat in front of my laptop pretending to work, But all I could see was the phrase on that receipt. Don't overthink it. You already know. Whoever wrote that didn't know me, clearly. Overthinking is what I do best. I overthink whether the groceries are bagged right. I overthink the tone of my baristas. Have a good one. That note may as well have said, please spiral for 48 hours. At exactly 2:46 p.m., I pulled the receipt back out of her coat pocket. I'd been staring at it all day in my head, memorizing the handwriting, wondering if she wrote it or he did. The receipt itself was from a cocktail bar I didn't recognize, not some dive or chain, but one of those sleek, dimly lit places with gold foil menus and bartenders who wear leather aprons. Classy, not casual. That stung more than I thought it would. She dressed up for it. This wasn't a, we just wandered in after the party situation. This was planned. I turned the receipt over in my hands again, and that's when I noticed it. On the top corner, in smaller, lighter ink, written diagonally like an afterthought. 206, 8XX, XX92. A phone number. I nearly dropped it. I felt like I'd just picked up a live wire. I stared at the number for maybe 20 minutes, thumb hovering over the keypad, telling myself not to be that guy. But I was already that guy. I had been since I saw them on the patio. Since I walked home in silence. Since I held a receipt like it was a crime scene. So I called. It rang once. Then twice. Then a click. And a voice. Low. Male. Unbothered. Yeah. I didn't speak at first. My brain jammed. I hadn't expected anyone to answer, honestly. I thought maybe it would be a fake number, or a bar manager, or voicemail. But this guy, he sounded like he already knew who was calling. Hello, he said again, slower this time. I said the dumbest thing possible. Who is this? He chuckled, like it was cute. Like we were kids prank calling each other. If you have the number, he said, you already know the answer. I froze. Before I could form a second question, he hung up. I just sat there with the phone still to my ear, listening to the silence on the other end, feeling like I had just stepped into a room I wasn't supposed to be in. There was something in his voice, not arrogance, not even confidence, but calm. Like he didn't see me as a threat. Like this wasn't the first time he'd been called by a husband. That night, I didn't confront Clarabelle. I watched her from across the room like she was someone else's wife, like I was renting this life from someone more qualified. She made dinner, watched a show, laughed at a text she didn't tell me about, and said goodnight like she meant it. She kissed me on the cheek. But it felt like a receipt, too. Folded, rehearsed, paid for. I didn't sleep again. Instead, I looked up the bar from the receipt, scrolled through their tagged Instagram photos, searching for her face in the backgrounds. And at 1:03 a.m., I found something. It was blurry, overexposed. But there she was, smiling. Her hand was on his. And they weren't at the bar. They were at a table, candlelit. I didn't mean to keep the receipt in my pocket, but it stayed there all day like it was glued to me. I couldn't even sit without feeling it against my thigh, like it had weight. Not physical weight, mental weight. Like it carried more than ink and numbers. I kept touching it, checking it hadn't disappeared. I didn't know why. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not even the guys from work on our daily call. I almost said something to Ben. He's the only one who still asks how I'm doing without sounding like he's checking a box. But I didn't. Because if I said it out loud, then it would be real, tangible, confirmed. And part of me still wanted this to be a misunderstanding. But then came the number. I didn't even notice it the first 3 times I looked. It was faded, like it had been written with a pen that was dying. Tucked diagonally into the top left corner of the paper, so small it looked like part of the receipt's serial code. But it wasn't. It was a phone number. A Seattle area code. I ran it through reverse lookup sites. Nothing. No name. No business. Just private owner. That made it worse. For an hour, I stared at the number like it was a portal. I kept asking myself stupid questions like, what if it was her boss? What if it was a Lyft driver? What if she dropped the receipt and someone else picked it up and wrote the number as a prank? But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The note on the back, don't overthink it. You already know. That wasn't a prank. That was a message, and it wasn't meant for a stranger. Eventually, my hand dialed the number without my permission. The phone rang twice, and I was already regretting it. But I didn't hang up. Not even when it clicked and a voice came on the line. Low, calm, almost amused. Yeah. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask who I was. Just, yeah. Like we were in the middle of a conversation that I'd forgotten we were having. I froze. My heart was suddenly pounding so loud I thought the receiver would pick it up. I hesitated, then managed to push the words out. "Who is this?" There was a pause. Not long, just enough to make me question everything. Then the guy chuckled. Not a nervous chuckle. A comfortable one. The kind you hear from someone who's holding the better cards at the poker table. Then he said, "If you have this number, you already know who I am." And just like that, he ended the call. Click. That was it. No threat. No denial. Just that smug confidence, like he wasn't just unbothered. He was inviting me to figure it out. Like this was entertainment for him. I stood there with the dial tone still buzzing in my ear, my hand trembling and my thoughts racing in every direction at once. I felt sick. I felt small. Like I'd just been laughed out of a room I wasn't supposed to enter. I couldn't stop replaying the sound of his voice. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't guilty. It was worse than both. It was relaxed. That night, Clarabelle acted like nothing had happened. She was humming in the kitchen while she chopped onions. Humming. She hadn't hummed in months. She made some ridiculous couscous recipe she found on TikTok and talked about a podcast she started listening to about cults. The irony wasn't lost on me. I barely nodded. My appetite was gone. But I played along. Because I needed time. After she went to bed, I waited 15 minutes. I watched the hallway to make sure she wasn't getting back up. Then I took her coat out again. My hands shook slightly, even though I already knew what I was looking for. I pulled the receipt back out and unfolded it like it was a secret file. I stared at it again. This time, I noticed the name of the bar, Juniper Room. Upscale. Obscure. Not the kind of place you wander into. You go there on purpose. With reservations. With plans. I Googled the Juniper Room. Their Instagram was mostly cocktails and grainy mirror selfies from drunk couples. But around 1 a.m., I found it. A tagged photo in the background of someone else's story. There she was. Not blurry. Not questionable. Not deniable. Her arm was resting across the back of a booth. Her hair was pulled back the way she only does when she wants to show off her shoulders. She was mid-laugh. And next to her, him. A man I couldn't fully see, but one arm rested on the table. The same beige sweater I saw that night. The one from the party. I didn't zoom in. I didn't need to. That image, frozen, time-stamped, public, burned into my brain. They weren't just talking. They weren't just flirting. They were comfortable. Familiar. Like this wasn't the first time. Maybe not even the second. And that scared me more than anything else. Because it meant I hadn't just been lied to once. It meant I'd been living inside a lie for a while. By the next night, I couldn't sit still. The house felt like a staged version of itself. Every photo frame on the shelf looked like it was mocking me. The laughter in those pictures was fake now. Not Photoshop, just hollow. Like I could hear the echo in it. Clarabelle was upstairs taking one of her long candlelit baths. I used to find them romantic. Now I wondered if they were strategic, silent time to text someone else. Or to delete things. I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to see the place. I needed to feel it in my bones. So I left. I told her I was going out to pick up melatonin. Half a lie. I didn't need sleep aids. I needed answers. The Juniper Room sat on a corner in Capitol Hill, tucked behind a florist in a gallery that always looked closed. It didn't scream for attention. No neon, no sign out front. Just a brass plaque on a black door and two dim lanterns like it was trying to hide in plain sight. I almost walked past it before doubling back. My hands were sweating. I hadn't even stepped inside, and I already hated the way the air felt around me, like it knew I didn't belong there. I walked in slow, eyes scanning the room. It was quieter than I expected. Not dead, but intimate. Couples tucked into booths with low voices and lower morals. A bartender polishing glasses like he was born to do it. And the smell, cedar, orange peel, gin, something faintly burnt. I imagined Clarabelle sitting in one of these booths, twirling her straw while making inside jokes with someone I'd never met. I took the only open seat at the bar. Didn't order anything for the first 10 minutes. I just sat there absorbing the place, trying to feel what she might have felt. Why here? Why this place? Finally, I asked the bartender, casual tone, like I was just curious, if they had an open mic or private events on weekends. He said no. Just the regular crowd. That phrase stuck in my brain like a needle. The regular crowd. As if this wasn't just a bar. It was a pattern. Eventually, I excused myself to the bathroom, mostly just to breathe. It was down a narrow hallway, walls painted a deep green with gold trim like it was trying to impress a ghost. I splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw a man who didn't know his own life anymore. And then I heard it. Two men had come into the bathroom behind me. One went into a stall. The other stayed by the sink. I wasn't paying much attention until I heard the name. Clarabelle. It hit me like a hammer. I froze. The voice wasn't familiar. Deeper. Confident. Laughing under his breath as he said it. Clarabelle's husband has no idea, he added. She says he's the boring kind. Thinks too much. Watches people more than he talks. My chest caved in. That was me. That was exactly me. The other man in the stall said something muffled. The guy by the sink replied. She told me he called. Can you believe that? Called me from the number I gave her. I didn't say anything. Just let him squirm. He's not going to do a damn thing. I backed against the wall like I could disappear into it. I felt small. Pathetic. And something darker crept up behind the humiliation. Fear. Not just of betrayal. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. This was starting to feel planned. Coordinated. A game I didn't know I was a piece in. The man at the sink laughed again, turned on the faucet, and said one last thing before walking out. She's better at this than I thought. The door shut. I stayed in that bathroom for 5 more minutes, staring at the floor, heart beating in my teeth. I had questions now that I didn't even know how to form. Who were they? How long had this been going on? And what exactly was this? When I finally stepped back into the bar, the man was gone. But something was waiting for me on the counter where I had left my seat. A folded napkin. My name written on the outside. No one saw who left it. I sat down slowly, staring at it, trying to decide if I should open it right there or burn it. The napkin felt heavier than it had any right to be. Just thin, folded paper with my name scrawled on the outside, and yet I stared at it like it was wired to explode. No one at the bar was looking at me. Not the bartender. Not the couple behind me, who were too busy feeding each other olives and lies. Whoever left it had vanished cleanly, like they were never there at all. That made it worse. It meant they were watching, not interacting. Someone had waited until I was in the bathroom to strike, and that meant they knew my habits. My movements. Possibly even my thoughts. I unfolded it slowly, hands trembling, not from fear, but from something more primal. Exposure. Like I just realized the walls of my life were made of glass. Inside, written in the same tight, aggressive handwriting as the number on the receipt, were 4 words. The window sees everything. That was it. No name. No threat. No phone number. Just a cryptic, vaguely poetic phrase that sent ice down my spine. I immediately thought of the living room window at home. Our front window. The one I always leave cracked open for the dogs. The one that faces the street. The one that overlooks our couch. Had someone been watching me? Had I been surveilled in my own house? Was this all some cruel, coordinated game between Clarabelle and this man and who else? I stuffed the napkin into my jacket and walked out of the juniper room without saying a word. The night felt colder than it had going in. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching me, not metaphorically. Literally. Eyes on my back, across the street, from a car, from a rooftop, from a camera. Back home, Clarabelle was asleep. Or pretending to be. Our bedroom door was cracked slightly open, enough to show the corner of the bed and the silhouette of her body under the covers. I didn't go in. I walked straight to the living room, pulled back the curtain, and stared out the window. At first, it looked normal. Nothing suspicious. Quiet suburban street. Streetlight humming like always. But then I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Across the street, directly in line with our window, was a black SUV, parked on the opposite curb. Engine off. Headlights dark. Windows tinted to the point of opacity. I couldn't see inside. It might have been empty, but it hadn't been there when I left. And worse, it had a parking ticket tucked under the wiper, meaning it had been there long enough to be noticed. Long enough to be reported. But it was still here. I stepped back from the window like it had burned me. My mind raced through every possibility, most of them irrational, all of them terrifying. Was this just a stalker? A voyeur? Some stranger who got off on ruining lives? Or was it something else? Something orchestrated? I stayed awake all night again. I opened every curtain in the house, turned off all the lights, sat on the staircase in the dark with a kitchen knife and my phone on silent. It wasn't bravery. It was the kind of exhausted paranoia that makes you forget what normal feels like. At 3:12 a.m., I got a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. You're getting close. Be careful who you trust. No emojis. No typos. No autocorrect mistakes. Whoever sent it typed that sentence like they meant it. I didn't reply. I didn't block it. I just stared at it for so long that my phone locked itself out. The next morning, Clarabelle acted like nothing had changed. Made pancakes. Wore that old hoodie of mine she always said was too baggy. She even kissed my forehead and asked if I was feeling okay. I looked at her and said, "Do you know anyone who drives a black SUV?" She paused, just a fraction of a second. But it was there. Then she shook her head. "No," she said casually. "Why?" And I replied with the truth. "Because someone's been watching the house." She laughed, like it was ridiculous. "Maybe it's just the new neighbor," she said. "The guy who moved in last week?" There was no new neighbor. The unit next door had been empty for months. I didn't correct her. I just nodded and poured syrup over pancakes I didn't eat. Because the truth had become slippery now. And she wasn't just lying to me anymore. She was lying confidently, which meant she believed I wouldn't do anything about it. The next 3 days were like slow poison. Nothing overt happened. Clarabelle didn't slip up. No more texts came through. The SUV disappeared. The napkin stayed hidden under a loose floorboard in my office, like I was hiding state secrets. But something inside me had already shifted permanently. I couldn't laugh at commercials. Couldn't finish a sandwich. Couldn't hear the sound of her footsteps without my stomach tightening like I was bracing for a punch that never came. She had returned to normal, and I was still sinking. The only new detail came from the calendar on the fridge. She had marked supper club on Thursday night in green marker, the kind she only used for social stuff. I remembered her mentioning it a few times, some once-a-month dinner thing she'd started attending with coworkers. She always came home full, smiling, and a little too chatty. I used to be glad she had something outside of me. But now I saw it differently. It felt like camouflage. I waited until she left that evening. I didn't even pretend to be casual about it. I watched from the living room window as she got into her car, wearing a beige coat she hadn't touched in months. That alone set off alarms. She only wore that coat when she wanted to look elegant but unbothered. Like she was on her way to a rooftop wine tasting in some city that didn't exist. I gave her a 10-minute head start before grabbing my keys. I had no plan, just impulse and suspicion. I kept enough distance to avoid detection, trailing 3 cars back at every turn, heart hammering through my ribs. We drove past downtown, past the industrial district, into an area of the city that barely had street lights. Warehouses, empty lots, buildings with faded logos and boarded-up windows. No restaurants, no houses, no supper clubs. I was about to lose her when she suddenly pulled into a narrow alley and disappeared. I parked on the shoulder half a block back and followed on foot. The alley ended at a rusted metal door tucked behind a shipping container. No signage, no address. But just above the door, in faded red paint, was a symbol I couldn't recognize, a circle split by a jagged line, like someone tried to draw a cracked eye. She knocked twice. The door opened. She went inside. I waited 10 minutes before creeping closer, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the traffic a few blocks away. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. Just muffled conversation. No music. No clinking dishes. No laughter. This wasn't a supper club. This was something else. I stepped back and looked around the alley. That's when I saw it. A second door, slightly ajar, near the corner of the same building. I moved toward it, every step heavier than the last. Inside was a long hallway, poorly lit, walls covered in peeling paint and outdated flyers for events that never happened. I followed the sound of voices. Eventually, I reached a room with a cracked window near the ceiling. I stood on a rusted metal box and looked inside. Clarabelle was there. So was the man from the patio, the same one from the photo at the bar, now clearly visible in harsh fluorescent light. He was standing in front of a whiteboard, gesturing like a teacher. Around him sat 6 people, Clarabelle among them, all facing forward, quiet, listening like students in some bizarre, secret class. On the whiteboard were phrases scribbled in red. Emotional access points. Stage 3 compliance. Primary observers plus false partners. I didn't understand a single word. Clarabelle raised her hand. The man nodded. She stood up and said, "My subject believes he's leading the suspicion now, but his behavior is still contained." They all nodded. Someone wrote something in a notebook. I lost my breath. My vision narrowed. My subject. Contained. I stepped down from the box before my knees gave out. I stumbled back into the hallway, holding onto the wall for balance. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being studied. I couldn't feel my legs as I got back to the car. I drove home in silence, windshield wipers ticking across glass I couldn't even see through. My mind had spiraled so far into a tunnel that reality felt optional. Words from the whiteboard echoed in my head. False partners, emotional access, stage 3 compliance. The way she stood there, calmly describing me like a lab rat. The others nodding like they'd done it too. What was this? A cult? A psychological experiment? Some kind of underground therapy circle gone too far? I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even blink. I sat in my office with the lights off, just listening to the walls. I didn't know who I could trust. Every memory with Clarabelle began to rot at the edges. Every touch, every glance, every laugh. Was any of it real? Had she been preparing me for this? Had she always been studying me? The next morning, she acted normal again. Made coffee. Asked if I'd walk the dogs. Wore a sweater she knew I liked. But something was different now. Not in her, in me. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't lost. I wasn't scared. I was done. I didn't confront her. Not at first. Instead, I waited until she left for work and opened her laptop. Something I hadn't done in years, out of respect. But respect has an expiration date. Her desktop was clean, but the folder was right there, nested under a label that read Client Archive. Inside it were videos. Not many. 5, maybe 6. All of me. One of me reading on the couch. One of me cooking dinner. One of me asleep, twitching during a nightmare. One of me standing at the window the night I first saw the SUV. None of them threatening. None edited. Just raw footage. Quiet. Clinical. But it wasn't surveillance footage. They were titled things like Subject M. Isolation Response. Subject M. Avoidance Pattern 2. Subject M. Refusal to confront. I thought I'd be sick. But instead, something strange happened. I smiled. Not out of joy. Not out of sarcasm. Out of realization. Because the labels were wrong. They weren't the labels of someone watching me like prey. They were the labels of someone trying to understand me. Track patterns. Monitor behaviors. It wasn't malice. It was obsession. The kind that comes from not being able to let go. And suddenly, the entire situation began to feel less like betrayal and more like fear. Her fear. Of me leaving. Of the marriage fading. Of her losing control. The man from the bar, was he part of the plan? Or was I the plan, and he was just a tool to trigger a reaction? It didn't matter. Because I was done being studied. That evening, while she was still at work, I packed one bag. Just essentials. I left a note on the kitchen counter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was only one sentence. You can't love someone if you only look at them through glass. Then I drove away. I didn't disappear. I stayed with my brother up in Bellingham for a few weeks. Ate real food. Walked real forests. Let the silence rebuild me. I stopped checking my phone. I blocked the number that had texted me. I deleted the videos from my head, one by one. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I slept. I didn't hear from Clarabelle for a long time. Until one day, a letter arrived. Not a text. Not an email. A letter. It was handwritten. Sloppy. Honest. Full of things I didn't expect her to be brave enough to say. She admitted the experiment. It was a project from a workshop she'd joined. Something radical and unethical they convinced her would heal broken intimacy. She said it was supposed to stop after one session. But then she got addicted to watching me from the outside instead of fixing things from the inside. She said she was sorry. Truly sorry. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. And here's the part that might surprise you. I forgave her. Not out loud. Not officially. But inside I did. Because I didn't want to live the rest of my life dragging a ghost of her behind me. Forgiveness wasn't letting her back in. Forgiveness was letting myself out. It's been 6 months now. I live near the coast. Small town. Quiet air. I go to therapy. I talk more. I listen less to fear. And sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window, not because I think someone's watching, but because now, I'm finally watching back.